May I speak to you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. A mother heard a knock at the door. Her young teenage son had been shot and killed in Gangland, LA. The killer himself was a young boy, living on the streets and instructed by the local gang to kill. At the trial, the mother watched as the boy was sentenced. As he was escorted out of court, the mother called to him, "I'm going to kill you." After a few months, the mother visited the boy in the youth offenders unit. She gradually started visiting more often, bringing him money and gifts. When he was due for release, she asked what he was going to do. He had nowhere to go. So she said he could come and live in her spare room for a while, and found a job for him in a friend's company. This morning we have heard the wonderful story of the prodigal son. What a story! And we can learn so much from this. The 20th century Scottish theologian William Berkeley considers that the parable should have actually been called the parable of the loving father, as it's more about the father's love and forgiveness than the son's sin. It is told on Jesus' journey to Jerusalem and is one of the best known parables, sometimes referred to as the greatest short story in the world. There are three remarkable facts at the beginning. The son leaving the family, the son demanding his inheritance, and the father agreeing. The younger son wants freedom and adventure. And how many young people today want the same? Was perhaps rare in Jesus' day. Today we have the gap year. I have to admit I too wanted freedom and adventure when I was younger. I left a very good and stable job at a bank and took off to Austria to ski for a season. Well, that was the intention, but I eventually spent 5 years overseas, skiing in Austria in the winter and spending the summers working in the south of France. I'll also admit that some partying was involved, and yes, I came home broke. The difference is that apart from upsetting my dad by sacrificing my career and causing my mum 5 years of worry, there was no real impact, societal or otherwise. I have not hurt anyone, and I have to say it's one of the best things I've ever done. Back to Jesus' time. The behaviour of the younger son was not acceptable on many levels. By demanding his inheritance, the younger son has shown no respect or consideration to his father. It would have been an incredibly huge insult, and it's remarkable the father agreed. This just was not done. It reflected not only badly on him, but by his father conceding to his request, he broke cultural rules, and his father would have been shunned by the community. Family solidarity was paramount in these times, and identity was formed from position in the family, village, and religious community. The father let go of his status and his honour. We see the younger son setting out having cashed in his inheritance, probably having a jolly good time for a while, perhaps indulging in a bit of spend. However, he then falls on hard times and ends up feeding pigs, and is presumably working for a Gentile family. For the Jews, this would have been shocking. The son finally has enough and plans to go home. We see in the parable Jesus saying when he has come to himself. Jesus believed that people could not be their true self when they're away from God. So we can take from this that the son is seen to be returning to God. The son sets out and returns home, planning to fall on his father's mercy. And here we have the real heart of the parable. The father runs to welcome his son with love, compassion, and total forgiveness. The father ran. Running was certainly not a dignified action by a Jewish man. He requests the best robe, a ring, and sandals for his son, all symbols of authority and distinction. And the father requests a fatted calf to be slaughtered, ready for a great feast. A feast not only to celebrate his son's return, but to appease the local community. The son's actions were not just an insult to his father, but to the community as a whole. We'll now look at the response of the other son. It could be said that he is also lost. We can see his resentment in the explosive conversation with his father, and gather from this that he sees himself as a slave. Barclay considers that this son stands for the self-righteous Pharisees, and considers his obedience to his father being out of duty and not out of love. We also see the eldest son not joining the feast. More humiliation for the father. So ultimately the father has been humiliated by both sons and absorbs the shame from both. We could perhaps look at our own actions and motivations. Do we sometimes do the same as the eldest son? Do we come to church out of duty? Or do we enter the church full of a love for God and desperate to show this to the Lord? When we help others, are we seeking the approval of others or the approval of God? Our actions must be for the love of God. God, our Creator and Comforter, who is always with us. Ultimately, the message from this parable is that of forgiveness. We see the analogy of the younger son coming to himself and returning to God. We could further the analogy by saying the father, who gives unconditional forgiveness to the younger son, is representing God. We can apply this by saying those who come to God prepared to be sorry for their transgressions will be forgiven by God. And at what cost? Not a great cost at all. Only to be prepared to accept God's love. And that's not too bad, is it? How wonderful forgiveness is. Perhaps today we could consider if we ourselves could be more forgiving in our everyday life. It can be so hard, yet so fulfilling. And I do believe the Holy Spirit helps us. As you know, I'm a fairly new Christian, and there's now something helping me to forgive more easily. I sincerely believe that something is the Holy Spirit. However, I should add this is very much work in progress. We can see the benefits of forgiveness in terms of the forgivee and the forgiver. To forgive is an amazing gift we can give. An unconditional forgiveness. Like the father did in the parable. A forgiveness that does not hold anything over the head of that person in the future. It has to be complete, unconditional forgiveness. On the face of it, this is not easy. But then, have you ever forgiven someone and felt the joy of having done so? Anger, bitterness and hurt are not good emotions to hold within us. They are unpleasant for us and can affect our relationship with others. When we unconditionally forgive another, these emotions are diffused and released. They're gone. And I do believe the Holy Spirit is there to help us with this. The ability to forgive is a true gift from God. We must also learn to forgive ourselves. We're all guilty of wrongdoings, and we will continue to be guilty on an ongoing basis, even if we try not to. Whilst Jesus is sinless, we, unfortunately, are not. But if God is prepared to forgive us, then it would be very wrong for us not to forgive ourselves. Sometimes, though, this can be harder than forgiving others. So at the beginning, we've heard the story of a mother whose son was killed and who subsequently offered kindness to his killer and allowed him to live in her home. One evening they were sitting in the living room together, and the mother said to the boy, "Do you remember what I said to you when you were sentenced in court?" Slightly shaken, the boy replied, "Yes, you said you would kill me." The mother replied, "Well, I have. I have killed the boy who killed my son. That boy no longer exists." The mother subsequently adopted the boy. The boy who killed was killed by forgiveness and kindness and was prepared to accept the mother's love. What an amazing story. What a difference the world could be if we had a world of forgiveness and a world of accepting God's love. But we can make a difference. If we forgive, maybe others will forgive. If we perform an act of kindness, maybe others will too. Let's lead by action and not words. Amen.
Amen.